Well, hello, this is David McKay with McKay Photography Academy. And if you are watching this video, that means that you are either one, taking a class from us coming up, or two, probably going on a photography tour and adventure with us. Or maybe you just came across our website and came across this, and this is just basically an overview on knowing where your dials are on a Canon camera. Now, this is a basic Canon camera that is going to have one dial. That's really important. And I'm going to show you how you're able to change the shutter speed, the aperture, and also your ISO on a camera that has one dial. So what do I mean by the one dial? Well, let's just take a look here. So a standard Canon system, such as one of the Canon T Series cameras as an example. So it would be something like the T7, T7i, maybe an earlier version like T3, newer versions T8, etc. Those are going to be a one dial system. And if you look down at your camera at the top of the right hand side where you grip the camera, you're going to notice there's a dial here. This is your main control dial that you're going to be using a lot. You'll also see the shutter button, which is used to depress and actually take the photograph. You may see a button that says ISO. Now, you may or may not see that ISO button on your camera. They do put it in various locations on the different cameras, so don't worry too much about that. Your power switch, of course, and of course we have what's known as the mode dial. And we're going to be getting into that later, but this is mostly just about knowing how to get around your camera. Right now, you're going to want to go ahead and place your camera over to the M, this little spot right here. It's very likely, if you're new on the automatic, we want to be using these here and other video tutorials we have. And of course, going on our tours in our classroom, we talk about how to do your manual settings. So if you want to see how this dial works, we're going to move that over to M for manual, and we'll get playing with this dial. And I'm also going to show you the difference between this camera and, say, a camera that has a two dial system, so you know exactly what you have. Now, when you're taking a look at the back of your camera, this is important. If your camera has a dial like this, not buttons, but a dial like that, that means that you have a two dial system. That means the top dial I just showed you would be your top main dial, and that's going to be used to change things like your shutter speed. This back dial is going to be used to change items such as your aperture, also known as an f-stop. So if you have that, we would like you to go over to the two dial video for Canon cameras. That would be the Canon cameras that have two dials, and that would be a Canon such as the Canon Mark III, Mark IV, 7D, 6D, and a variety of others. The main thing is to look and make sure if you have a secondary dial like this, then that would be for one of those cameras. Now I'm going to show you what the camera looks like if it only has the one dial, which was the main dial up on top. Now you're going to notice on the back of this Canon camera, it looks different than the other one I just showed you. Instead of a rotating dial right here, it's got buttons, and it specifically will have a button that says A with a little V and this little plus minus, and it also will show you the trash can here. Now, people get really confused because they think if they push this button, that means that they're deleting their photos. That is not correct. It does have a dual functionality, meaning it's going to help change some of your settings, but it is also a place where you can delete your photos. It's kind of a poor design, but we're going to work with that. Don't worry, because before you ever delete a photo, it actually asks you if that's what you want to do. But just as the beginning here, you should have the main dial on front, and of course, then we have the back dial here, or excuse me, not the back dial, the back buttons here, and instead of a dial here, you see buttons. Now you'll notice this camera, the ISO button is here, where the other camera I showed you, it was up on top. And again, it can be in varying locations. Important thing is to understand if you have the one main dial and this setup, or if your camera is two dials, which would be the front top main dial as well as a back dial, as I just showed you. So it's very simple to get around the Canon camera systems, and we're back here and I'm showing you that we have this front dial here with this arrow, that's that main dial. If you've now put your camera on the manual settings with the mode dial right here, this big button we showed you, if you should have changed that to M for manual already, you're going to notice that when you rotate this dial, you're going to move something that is known as the shutter speed. So you'll be actually moving your shutter speed. Your three items that you need to be able to choose and change are your shutter speed, your aperture, also called an f-stop, and also the ISO. That's all we really need you to know right now. We're going to help you through that when we're in class, and of course when we're on location photographing on our tours. So right now we just want to make sure you know how to get around your camera, and this dial right here, get used to using that. That's going to be your shutter speed dial. That's how we're going to change the shutter speed. Now let's take a look at how we're going to change the aperture / f-stop. To change the aperture, you're going to go ahead and you're going to hold down this button that has the A with a little V, which stands for aperture value, and this little plus minus sign. You're going to hold that down while simultaneously rotating the dial on the front of the camera, the main shutter speed dial that we just used. That's actually a dual function as well. So it's not just shutter speed, it also changes other items. So when it's by itself, it changes shutter speed, but when we hold this button down and keep it held and then use that dial on the front, you will see this number, which is known as your aperture or your f-stop, will also move. Now you'll notice this camera doesn't actually have the trash can here. So again, varying cameras have varying little differences in them. In the single dial camera, meaning only the front top dial that you don't have a dial back here, but you have buttons, it's simply change the main dial to change your shutter speed, and then hold this button in with your thumb and use that main dial again, and you will be changing your aperture. So go ahead and try that now. And again, just go back and forth between the shutter and then also changing the aperture. And finally, we have the ISO sensitivity. And again, don't worry if you're not sure exactly what that means. We're going to be getting into all that. We just want you to know how to change it. So now you're going to notice on your camera that you need to look for a button that says ISO on it. And when you press that down, then the sensitivity numbers will come up and you can scroll through them using that main dial that was on top. So again, you may have the ISO button here, or you may see that the ISO is actually the buttons on the top of the camera. But when you depress that, then you use that same main dial to change through the ISO settings. So for now, it's really, really simple. It's simply the main dial, which will change your shutter speed. To change the aperture, you hold this button in while using the main dial up here. And then to change ISO, you simply depress that, and then on the back of your screen or through your viewfinder, you will be able to change all of the ISO sensitivity settings. So get used to using and just changing through those three. This tutorial was simply about being able to change those three. We will get into other buttons at another tutorial, but wanted to make sure that you knew how to change those three main settings on your Canon camera that is a one dial system.